Most of what we call reality is not born outside of us, but within. Our mind filters the world through the lens of past experiences, old beliefs, and mental patterns we no longer even notice. Research shows the majority of our daily thoughts are repetitive, and many of them are negative. What we think we see outside is often just a reflection of what's already happening inside. What appears to be an objective fact is, more often than not, a mirror of our inner state. Picture this. Two people lose their jobs on the very same day. One falls into despair, convinced that everything is lost. The other sees it as a chance to start fresh, to change careers, to grow beyond what they were. Same fact, two completely different realities. The difference? Not what happened, but the meaning each person gave to it. The first believed their worth was defined by their position. The second understood a job does not define who they are. And that tells us something important. You don't react to facts themselves. You react to the story your mind tells about those facts. If that inner story is built on old fears, unresolved wounds, or limiting beliefs, life will appear far more chaotic than it really is. The good news? This cycle isn't final. Thinking can be rewired. The moment you start observing your thoughts without identifying with them, a new freedom of choice appears. But then, why, even knowing our mistakes, do we keep stepping on the same rake? What drives us to live on autopilot? And most importantly, how do we break free from this loop? My name is Roman, and this is the Procrustean Bed. Your like, comment, and subscription will help this video reach more people. And just a quick note, I use AI voice assistants to reduce my strong accent. I hope it won't take away from your experience of this video. Carl Jung once observed, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." We've all noticed it. Despite a sincere desire to change, we keep repeating the same patterns of behavior over and over. We react the same way whenever we feel disagreement, the fear of rejection, or the loss of control. This isn't a failure of willpower, it's autopilot. The brain is designed to conserve energy, and one way it does this is by turning emotional and behavioral patterns into unconscious habits. Research shows roughly 40% of our daily actions aren't conscious decisions at all, but automatic routines. That means nearly half of what you do each day, you do on momentum alone. Imagine someone who always avoids conflict. As a child, they learned that openly expressing their opinion was dangerous. It led to arguments, so they stayed silent. Now, even when they could speak up confidently, they remain quiet out of habit. Not because they choose to, but because long ago, they learned silence was safer. And this isn't limited to communication. It's how you respond to criticism, to disappointment, to challenges. These are mental scripts, written over a lifetime, now running on their own without your conscious participation. The good news? Autopilot can be switched off, but not with the wave of a magic wand. The first step is cultivating awareness, catching yourself in the very moment the automatic reaction kicks in. Even that single moment creates a pause, a space where you can choose differently. When you observe a thought from a step outside, without rushing to act, you open the door to choice. Yet the moment we try to escape autopilot, another obstacle appears, our deep desire to control everything around us. Why is it that the more we try to hold on to control, the more our anxiety grows, and the more stuck we become?
One of the main sources of anxiety is the constant attempt to control what cannot be controlled. We try to predict every detail, to keep everyone and everything neatly within the bounds of our expectations. But here's the paradox. The more you try to control everything, the more insecure you feel. The human brain doesn't like uncertainty. It often prefers a bad but predictable outcome over complete unknowns. That's why so many people stay for years in unpleasant situations, in a job they hate, in a relationship that drains them, simply because it feels more certain. The familiar evil feels safer than the unfamiliar. But the truth is, total control is an illusion. You can plan carefully, prepare thoroughly, do everything in your power, and still never be able to fully control how others will act, what will happen tomorrow, or anything beyond your responsibility. Every time we try to change another person, to control their choices or actions, It almost never leads to the result we hope for. Instead, it brings disappointment, conflict, and emotional exhaustion. Deep down, the attempt to control others is born from fear. Some people micromanage every little detail out of fear something might go wrong, rereading a message 10 times before sending it, exhausting themselves trying to anticipate every possible scenario. The problem is, this never brings peace. It only creates more tension. Research shows that people with a high need for control experience more stress and cope worse with frustration. The turning point comes when you realize that letting go of total control doesn't mean giving up. It means focusing on what truly is within your power, your own choices, your reactions, your attitude. As Viktor Frankl wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And as the Roman Stoic Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. In other words, release what you cannot influence and direct your energy where your influence is real, on your inner state and your actions. When you do this, you may feel an unexpected relief, as if a heavy weight has been lifted from your shoulders. But once the outer noise quiets down, something strange can happen. You come face to face with the very thing you've been avoiding all along, your own silence.
Silence seems simple, yet for many, it's unbearable. The moment a free minute appears, we instinctively reach for the phone, turn on the TV, or find some background noise, anything to avoid being alone with our thoughts. Why is that? This discard has a reason. When the world around us goes quiet, an inner noise rises. It brings to the surface everything we've been avoiding. Insecurities, fears, hidden disappointments. That's why silence can be frightening. It exposes what everyday busyness keeps hidden. Consider this. In one experiment, participants were asked to spend just 15 minutes alone in silence. Many chose to give themselves mild electric shocks, rather than sit quietly with their own minds. This shows how deeply we fear being left alone with our thoughts. As far back as the 17th century, philosopher Blaise Pascal noted, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." A common example, someone is always busy, constantly in motion, and seems productive. But the moment they have free time, they feel an emptiness they can't even name. So they fill their schedule again, not because they need to, but because they fear confronting that inner vacuum. This endless escape keeps the mind active, but never at peace. The result? Emotional exhaustion, lack of clarity, and a chronic sense of dissatisfaction. The key is to change your relationship with silence. Not to run from it, but to use these moments to listen to yourself. This doesn't mean meditating for hours in a cave. It's about gradually learning to sit with your own rhythm, without endlessly trying to fill it with noise. Being here and now is not some mystical practice. It's a practical skill, useful in everyday life. Presence means noticing what's happening right now, without getting lost in thoughts about the past or anxieties about the future. It sounds simple, but in truth, it's rare. How many times have you been physically in one place, while your mind was somewhere else? This happens because the brain is trained to wander. We live in a constant state of anticipation, endlessly replaying events that haven't even happened yet. A Harvard University study found that people spend almost 47% of their waking hours thinking about something other than what they're doing at the moment. And here's the striking part. The more the mind wanders, the lower the reported levels of happiness and life satisfaction. The good news? You can change this. One of the most effective tools is mindful breathing. Pausing for a minute to focus solely on your inhale and your exhale. Even that is enough to break the automatic stream of thoughts and return to the present moment. Another useful technique is body scanning, directing your attention one area at a time to different parts of your body and simply noticing the sensations. These exercises don't take long. A few minutes between daily tasks is enough. Over time, this practice changes how you react. You begin to notice when an automatic emotion grabs hold of you, and you slowly gain the space to choose your response. Presence in the here and now isn't just a calming technique, it's the starting point for any genuine transformation. And once you've mastered the art of presence, you'll inevitably face the next challenge: pain, the kind that life inevitably brings. How can we remain resilient in the face of loss and disappointment?
There's a fundamental difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable. It's part of life. Losses happen, disappointments arrive. Every one of us, sooner or later, will have to endure pain. But suffering is something we build on top of that pain ourselves. Here's what I mean. The first wave is the raw pain itself, the ache we allow ourselves to feel and eventually release. The second wave is our thoughts about the pain. Thoughts like, I'll never be happy again, this always happens to me, I'm not good enough. Those thoughts are suffering, and suffering is not inevitable. Research backs this up. Studies show that the way we interpret a negative event directly shapes the intensity and the duration of our suffering. In other words, what keeps us trapped in pain is not the event itself, but the meaning we assign to it. Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of a concentration camp, wrote, "When suffering finds meaning, it ceases to be suffering." Through his life, he showed that even in the most inhuman conditions, a person can discover profound meaning, and that meaning is what makes the soul unbreakable. This isn't about ignoring pain or pretending everything is fine. It's about not letting pain become part of your identity. When trauma or grief takes the central place in our sense of self, the mind treats any attempt to change as a threat to who we are. We cling to our pain as if it defines us. The way forward is to let pain be without resisting it, to notice what you feel, to name your emotions, and to accept that feeling pain is not weakness, it's a sign of being alive. When you fully inhabit your feelings, without numbing them or amplifying them with thoughts, they gradually lose their grip. We don't defeat pain by fighting it. It recedes on its own when we stop resisting.
Attachment isn't only about relationships with people. It's about our expectations and demands toward life itself, about the desire for everything to unfold exactly as we imagined. The more tightly you cling to a fixed idea of how life should be, the more you suffer when reality refuses to match it. This applies to everything. Plans that never materialized, people who act differently than you hoped, the self-image you've built in your own mind. Attachments are mental constructions that eventually harden into emotional prisons. A clear example, someone spends years in a job that no longer brings them any sense of purpose. They know it, they feel it every day, and yet they stay, because they're attached to the idea that changing careers would mean failure. In this case, they're not just attached to the job itself, but to the identity they've built around it. Another common example is attachment to control within relationships. A person believes, if the other person changes, everything will be fine. And so they cling to this illusion, again and again, facing disappointment every time reality refuses to follow the imagined script. Psychologists confirm, the higher the level of emotional attachment, the more intense the suffering. Attachment makes your peace of mind dependent on external circumstances you cannot control. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means accepting that you can't control everything and that your inner calm should not depend on outside conditions. When you release the tense grip of wanting everything to be exactly as you wish, space opens up. Space to live what is instead of constantly longing for what isn't. As Erich Fromm observed, people sometimes fear the unknown so much that they escape from freedom, choosing to remain within familiar boundaries even when those boundaries cause suffering, simply because they feel predictable. But such an escape becomes a prison for the soul. True freedom requires the courage to let go of excessive control and to embrace life's uncertainty. When you let go, you don't lose yourself. You return to your true self, no longer chained to external outcomes. You begin to open up to what reality offers, instead of mourning what never came to be. The next step toward inner resilience is to examine the way you speak to yourself, because your inner dialogue can either erode your strength or become one of its greatest sources.
The way you speak to yourself shapes everything: your mood, your decisions, your confidence. And perhaps the most surprising part is that this inner monologue usually runs quietly in the background, almost unnoticed. If you listen closely, you'll find that for many people, there's a harsh inner critic living in their mind, constantly scolding them, judging them, comparing them to others. These thoughts may seem harmless, but they have a real impact. Research shows that people with a negative inner dialogue are more likely to experience stress and are more prone to anxiety and depression. In essence, it's like living with a relentless, fault-finding judge in your head. For example, someone forgets an important meeting at work. A healthy inner voice might say, "It happened. What can I do to fix this now?" But for many, the voice sounds different. "I'm useless. Now no one will ever trust me again." This kind of self-talk doesn't solve the problem. It only amplifies guilt and paralyzes action. This is where the reprogramming of your inner dialogue begins. It's not about self-deception or forcing positive vibes. It's about questioning automatic negative thoughts and replacing judgment with constructive questions. Instead of, "I never get anything right," you could ask, "What can I learn from this situation?" Instead of, "I'm weak," say, "This is hard right now, but I'm growing through it." It sounds simple, but this change in language changes the way you respond to life. You can't completely stop the flow of thoughts, but you can change the tone in which you speak to yourself. And that changes everything. Your outlook on the world, how you overcome challenges, even your mental health. Imagine a close friend making a painful mistake. You wouldn't insult or humiliate them. You'd probably try to comfort them and help find a solution. So why do we often treat ourselves worse than we'd treat someone we love? Why deny ourselves the same support we're ready to give others? Alain de Botton emphasizes the importance of self-compassion, a gentle, friendly attitude toward our own imperfections. Without it, we only deepen our wounds. When your inner voice stops tearing you down and starts supporting you, you become far more willing to learn from mistakes and keep moving forward. You become more flexible and more resilient in the face of life's blows. Resilience, the capacity for psychological strength, is not about enduring in silence. It's about the ability to turn pain into a driving force for growth. When you understand this, you stop seeing hardships as punishment or insurmountable walls. Instead, you begin to see them as part of the path, and even as opportunities for transformation. Imagine someone who suddenly loses their job. Their first reaction will likely be despair, anger, confusion. But over time, that experience can become a turning point. There are countless real stories of people who, after being laid off, started their own business, changed careers, or found a path far more aligned with their true calling. It wasn't easy, but it was possible, and in the end, it changed their lives for the better. Research shows that people who have gone through severe challenges and learned to reinterpret them report higher levels of long-term life satisfaction. The pain didn't vanish, but it became a catalyst for change. That's what separates those who break from those who grow stronger. Not the absence of pain, but how it's used. In such moments, the right question isn't, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What can I do with this now?" Even the worst experience can teach you something, or reveal something within yourself. In Japanese culture, there's the art of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, so that the cracks become the most precious part of the design. In the same way, our wounds and fractures can become sources of new beauty and strength, if we integrate them into our life story. And it's worth remembering, resilience isn't born in the heat of a crisis. It's built beforehand, through the small choices we make, every single day. Our inner peace is built step by step, in the small, everyday decisions we make. Caring for our emotional state, deepening self-awareness, creating that space between stimulus and response, all of this gradually strengthens us from within. Inner peace isn't something you stumble upon by chance. It's something you build. And that construction happens in the details. Choosing not to react instantly to an anxious thought, but to simply observe it. Choosing to take a deep breath instead of snapping. Choosing to disconnect from everything for a few minutes to reconnect with yourself. These are choices, and those choices change everything. Picture this. Someone has had a terrible day. They've been criticized at work. They're exhausted, irritated. They could come home and unload all of that negativity onto loved ones who've done nothing wrong. Or they could notice their feelings, pause, exhale before speaking. That's a choice, and that choice changes everything. Neuroscience confirms the brain is plastic. The reactions you practice repeatedly are the ones that grow stronger. This is true for impulsive outbursts as well as for mindful responses. Presence, shifting your inner dialogue, letting go, all of these require repetition. Understanding is not enough. You have to apply it. And perhaps most importantly, you have to accept that it won't always be easy. You'll slip, make mistakes, forget.
But every time you return to the path of awareness after falling off it, you grow stronger. You learn to rise from each stumble, more resilient than before. Step by step, this leads to a peace that no longer depends on external circumstances.
And this is where it all comes together. If you've made it to this point, you're no longer the same as when you began. The awareness you've gained is your treasure. What once hid in the shadows of the unconscious is now illuminated by your attention. The decisions you make from here will shape your next steps. Inner peace isn't somewhere far off in the future. It begins with how you live this moment, right now, in the small actions, in your attitude, in the quiet certainty within. At last, you find your anchor in yourself. You feel a sense of inner wholeness and calm that stays with you no matter what happens around you. The storms outside may rage, but within you, there is clarity and balance. And from now on, nothing and no one can shake you.